answer must be made at three levels. When we discuss persistent poverty in the Caribbean, we have to remember that the Caribbean forms a group of islands called small island developing states, and they have characteristics that are intricately linked to the persistence of poverty. These islands are very susceptible to economic and environmental shocks. For example, in Haiti, if you remember the last earthquake, it cost them 122% of their GDP. So in one instance, all social and economic gains can be lost. You also have a situation where imports outstrip exports, and any price changes in the international market will have a negative impact on the island's economy. And these have a trickle-down effect onto institutions. At the institutional levels, we have a situation where there is lack of political will to make some very important decisions to improve the welfare of the poor persons, and the very services that we provide for them are complicated. So we have replication of delivery of services. The very value of the benefits is not enough to break that intergenerational poverty, so that the islands are, the poor and the islands are caught up in a vicious cycle of poverty. We have high levels of inequality, and I need to mention too that these very islands have high levels of indebtedness, so that for example in Jamaica, 143% of our GDP goes to public payment of public debt. And at the micro level, the very activities of the poor persons entrap them in that intergenerational poverty, so that they use coping strategies that are not developmental. They remove the children from school, they do not send them to school on Fridays, they keep them on the farms, and they also increase their indebtedness, and they do less savings. So it's a vicious cycle, both at the macro, the meso, and the micro level. These are the causes for the persistence of poverty. As I said, the SIDS are special islands, and they have characteristics which need some global attention. There need to be some global partnership. That MDG number 8 has never been properly activated to ensure that we take notice of the vulnerability of small states. The states themselves need to do something. There's, for example, economic integration. So many small islands working independently cannot be viable, and the first step for them would be to become economically united and together think of a strategy of economic diversification. In terms of the local and the national levels, there need to be more effective social protection programs, looking both at the preventive aspect of poverty and also what we do with those who are there chronically poor over 5 years. So the strategies have to be more streamlined, more effective targeting, especially those in the rural areas and children. And of course, the responsibility of the persons below the poverty line themselves. They need to be held accountable for their own actions, and we have to teach them to empower themselves, to move, to use more developmental coping strategies, to invest in education. The value of education and good quality education can never be undermined, and therefore we want to increase equitable access to education and health and those basic social services which will break that cycle of intergenerational poverty. The MDGs are very relevant, and the social protection floor very relevant. I'm happy to see that beyond 2015, the national consultations have begun in the Caribbean, where the ownership of the MDGs and the strategies in which for us to fulfill the MDGs are being set by the locals themselves. I think the ownership of the process will help a lot in breaking that cycle of poverty. And the social protection floor remains relevant because we need to ensure that there's a basket of basic goods that everybody in the Caribbean can have access to, that we stress equity in and equality of opportunities for all, and that the social security, social protection become a very important aspects of our strategies to break the cycle of poverty.